and I'm going to just take a moment to get onto YouTube. David, maybe you could wanna, yeah, just stop sharing. This will just take a moment. Bear with me. Oh, here we go. Just 1 second.
Where's my?
All right. All right. Okay, so we should be good to go. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and welcome to the New York Studio School's virtual evening lecture series. Tonight we were very excited to be presenting on painting Merlin James and David Cohen in conversation. This is a long anticipated talk that was originally scheduled for April, I believe, when Merlin's show was originally scheduled, and like everything else, it's been turned upside down. We're just happy that we can make this happen with Merlin joining us from Glasgow. Before we begin, I would like to thank all of you for tuning in, taking the time out on this Tuesday evening. And I would like to also recognize that the New York Studio School Evening Lecture Series is generously supported in part by public funds from New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, in partnership with the City Council, the Robert Lehman Foundation, and many individual contributors. Please do consider making a donation during or after tonight's talk by clicking on the support button on our homepage at www.nYSS.org. And there you just click on the donate page and you can select how much. And it would be, I would be missed if I didn't mention that it's Giving Tuesday in the virtual world. So please do consider making a contribution. We're very appreciative. I'll introduce our speakers in just one moment. Before I do, if you are joining on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button. Please feel free to enter in a question at any time, and David will be manning that. And we can take questions. We'll leave time at the end, but David might take a question during the talk as well. And if you're joining via YouTube, just enter your question or comment in the comments section, and we'll be sure to get to that as well. Okay. I'll keep these introductions brief and turn it over to David, who will have a lot to share. But Merlin James is represented by Sikkema, Jenkins Company. They currently have his exhibition of paintings titled River on view here in New York City through January 23rd next year. Merlin was born in Cardiff and attended the Central School of Art and Design and the Royal College of Art, both in London. He has lived in Glasgow since 2004. Merlin has written about art extensively and is a regular contributor to the Burlington Magazine. And solar surveys of his paintings in recent years have been held at KW Institute in Berlin, Kunstverein in Freiburg, CCA in Glasgow, and OCT Museum in Shenzhen. David Cohen is publisher and editor of artcritical.com, which he's the founder and moderator of the review panel, which is the critics forum currently hosted by Brooklyn Public Library. He's also a scholar and an educator and a longstanding faculty member here at the New York Studio School. So he's a good friend. Thank you for joining us all. And without further ado, let's join in a virtual welcome for Merlin James and David Cohen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's so touching to see the, I can be seen and heard. Not that I need to be seen, but I can be heard, I hope. Yes, it's so touching to see Sam actually at his real desk at 8 West 8th Street there for a moment, with the familiar studio school, turquoise walls and artworks. But here we are embracing modern technology. We've already got 84 participants here on
Wow.
Zoom and more, I'm sure, at the YouTube channel, and it's being recorded, of course, for posterity and for those who can't make it this evening. So the very thin silver lining of the dark cloud of COVID is that we have a great audience, and very much look forward to questions and comments at the end. Here's the structure of what we're doing this evening. It may seem a little strange when here we are in person, zoomed into your computer screens and your iPhones or wherever. But we're going to start with a couple of bits of media because I'm very keen to sort of, first of all, locate Merlin's creative practice in the place where he is. We see him at the moment in his studio in Glasgow, and he participated in a recent series of sound exercises where a dozen artists were recorded, I think in their environments,
Natural habitat.
their natural habitat, as it were. So we get a sense of the artist. We get the sense of how artists are living their life during COVID and how the creative process continues. And it's a short but beautifully put together, edited piece. It's a very succinct a better way of introducing Merlin than for me to ramble on about the years I've known him. And we'll follow that by something else which might seem a little odd, seeing as we're all here, but I do have a tendency, which I'm already proving in this pre-intro to ramble on a bit. And so I've done like a 4-minute preview of Merlin's current show with video accompaniment, so that we can situate ourselves in Sikkema Jenkins. It's a fabulous show. It's ongoing. Before another lockdown occurs, get yourself to Chelsea, and there's great things to see there at the moment. And you can make an appointment or just try your luck and go and see his show at Sikkema Jenkins. So after those 2 bits of media, we'll be back for our live discussion. So I'm going to go now into share screen, and I'm going to start by finding here. Yeah, come to you later. Here is from George Graham Vasey is the instigator of this series. Yeah, this is called 42 Carlton Place 2020, and this is Merlin James.
Thanks so much, Victor. Good luck driving down.
You going to New York?
Well, you know, if the show's supposed to run November to January now, so I'll get over there if I possibly can.
I'll be good.
Thanks so much.
Bye, brother.
Take great care. Bye for now. Excellent to have those go out. Finally, they were supposed to go out in February or something, and this is July. And the space is empty. I mean, this ground floor of the house is normally empty. It's where occasionally we've done exhibitions. The house faces the river. It's right in the middle of Glasgow. And we've done, I don't know, 1 or 2 shows a year. And in fact, I did have a show up here before, right through lockdown, called Fieldwork, which was a kind of group show. I had Peter Lanyon and Frenella Clough and Andre Duran. We had great things, and then more contemporary things. And people saw it online mostly, but then I extended it, and in the end, quite a lot of people came and managed to see it. And so that has not so long ago gone out of the space as well. And then I thought I'd walk through to studios. I live upstairs, and then you walk through this nice garden space, well, small yard. And this is Carol's studio. This was Carol's studio, which is a lovely space, rafters and skylights. It's a sort of shed at the back of the house, 50 by 25 feet or something. This was the real reason why we went for this house. It had this studio at the back, or what we could make into a studio. And Carol's studio, I mean, it's in the process of having a deep clean, really, and then I'm going to get it photographed, more or less, you know, how she's left it. It's the books are out, the sort of source materials for the last painting she was working on, and the easel, brushes, and so on. And I will move up into this space, but you walk through to down to my space. Carol was urging me to move up into her space. It's got much more light, and I will do that eventually. But my space is down here, just sort of in the half basement. It's got a lot less light, but it's got these daylight bulbs. And it's much cooler down here as well. But again, it's a good space, and it's a rough space, but it's as much as I need, really. Or if I have 2 floors, it'll be luxurious, really. It's cool, though. I'm going to put the stove on. New York Review of Books, or London Review of Books, is my highlighters. And they're also my principal source of information about the world at large. I don't really read the newspapers. I don't ever read the newspapers. And then I paint against this wall, and I'm working on several things at a time, usually. And behind me are these racks of paintings, many of which are still in progress. Oh, that's probably Vicky. So I pull paintings out of the racks, put them in different combinations on the wall where I'm working and work. And this last lot of work that's gone out to New York for this show, I suppose it's very personal work, particularly these recent, it's been very much about this house, really, and this studio and life going on within this place and stuff that we're going through. I just have to trust that, you know, at a time when the world is in such a dire condition, somehow there is a continuity between my personal and private affairs and relationships and relationship to the environment, and that there's a continuum between that and, you know, the bigger picture. So we'll see what happens in here and out there in the coming months.
It's very strange to hear that.
Artist, Hamish Fulton, born on the 21st.
Yes.
Hamish Fulton was the next artist.
Artist. I recommend all of them. They're rather beautiful, and I'll put we'll put the URL for it in the comments at some point. going to write a note for myself to do that. So there are a dozen artists, but the Association of Art Critics in the UK put this series together, I believe. Is that correct, Merlin?
Yeah. And Peer Gallery.
All right, and the Peer Gallery. Fantastic. You might be wondering what this wonderful lady, Chardin, drinking her tea. We'll come to you later. Madam, you enjoy your tea. I now actually do, however, want to move on to our second bit of media, which is me previewing the show here that we are reviewing. So here we go.
Merlin James' current show at Sikkema Jenkins represents some significant shifts to those who follow his career closely, while at the same time it's business as usual on various fronts. This is his first solo show in New York since 2016, at a gallery he's been showing with since 1997. What is consistent with the Merlin James we know? First off, sheer variety of approach. Every show of Merlin James feels like something of a retrospective, many in fact are, with radical differences of support or surface, depiction or modernist abstraction, a sense of the intuited versus a sense of the found. It's as if multiple personalities are coming together for a group show. There are canvases with what seem like decorative impasto or improvisatory gestures recalling passages from Impressionist or Symbolist painters, while other works have tight, austere, minimal surface treatment, relying on material textures to convey form. Besides canvas, there are eccentric supports, shaped surfaces, meshes with assembled objects underneath or on top. Some canvases are unframed. Others have highly deliberative, artist-made frames or bizarre-seeming choices of found frames. As is typical with any show by Merlin James, the language of the medium seems exposed to interrogation, as if the language of painting itself is his theme. But while all this is going on, some striking departures are equally evident as well. Firstly, there are large, legible compositions, images where one or two figures engaged in what are quickly and easily legible activities, such, for instance, as painting pictures. And secondly, for all the diversity, there are consistent motifs running through the show. The river outside his studio home in Glasgow, as well as life in the studio. The show is titled River. Quoting from James, the gallery press release describes the subject matter of this show as the artist's daily nuanced awareness of the view from his home in Glasgow, looking out to the River Clyde and surrounding environments. These paintings constitute a, quote, familiar remembered image, a cumulative memory, unquote, incorporating all the, quote, inaccuracies or approximations, unquote, of his own recollection. The press release informs us that the images rely neither on direct observation nor photography, but are the products of memory. Another constant in the work of Merlin James is a sense of enigma. How much does the artist mean what he seems to be saying in these paintings? They really seem to mean something, but he doesn't necessarily insist on what that meaning is. In shows past, once we get over the impression of a group show, the assembled paintings almost seem like the found work of an unknown artist whose intentions have to be unpacked constructed. Here, there seems to be more of a direct communication than normal, a narrative, a sense of self. What that narrative is, however, remains to be interpreted.
Nice, thank you.
Well, thank you too. It's great to see you. I look forward to seeing you in person. If Dr. Fauci permits, you will be coming to see the tail end of your show.
Yeah, I'll come in January if I can, but who knows? Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Now, in that SoundCloud piece, you talked quite a bit about Carol, who was your late wife, and with whom you created the gallery at Carlton Place, and whose studio you were discussing the mechanics of turning it around, documenting it, and then moving on, as she insisted, to use the better lit space for your own practice. You're, I guess, downstairs now in your
Yes,
space.
here I am in that space. It was very strange to hear that, sitting then in the space where where that recording was made. But yeah, I didn't realize how strange that was going to be.
So, is there? I talked in my preview about the greater legibility and the sort of the sense almost of narrative and a communicative thrust in this body of work. Do you feel that to some extent biography is an incentive for that? First of all, do you recognize that as a departure, and is that explanation a starting point at least?
We were I was quite, I suppose, careful in the well, there was an interview in Brooklyn Rail, which in April when the show was supposed to happen, which with Louis Bloch, which is they retrospectively printed the 2 or 3 issues that didn't get printed because of COVID. But in that interview, we were quite circumspect. I was quite circumspect about how much or little information to give of that biographical sort. But the bigger question, as you suggest, is the question of whether, anyway, that degree of biographical information is permissible or helpful evidence in looking at these paintings. As you said in the video, there's a sense of a narrative in those paintings, these recurrent motifs. It does invite speculation more than a lot of my work has in the past as to who these people are and what their situation might be. But yes, it's not a simple case of we then tell the story and then everybody knows.
No.
Oh yes.
No, I can't think of an artist who would less want a sort of sentimental fallacy to be imposed on their production than you. But you do mention Carol quite a bit in the sound piece, so I thought that maybe
yes.
But then again, maybe somebody listening with virgin ears to that would
not know necessarily who that was, or that I mean, you can intimate a certain amount with that sound piece. Or that's too grandiose to call it a sound piece, but with that little, as with the paintings, there's a certain amount of information and a limitation to the information that you're given.
Yes. But the artist's place of work, of course, is one of the great tropes of depictive painting, and it's a kind of circular theme in a way, because if an artist is trying to avoid grand narratives and ground his or her observational practice in something immediate, something banal, something here and now, and something where painting itself, rather than the motif, it commands the principal attention.
Yeah.
Then the workspace is a natural motif, because it's almost just saying, these are the tools I'm using to make the thing that you're looking at now. But at the same time, in contradiction to that, the studio becomes a sort of sacred site. We think of Picasso's Vollard Suite or something, and then you know, that the studio situation is anything but merely about manufacture. How do you view the studio as a how do you view the notion of the studio as something sacred or banal in the life of the artist?
Yeah. It's as you say, it's a perennial thing, and I've just recently seen Morandi's house for the first time in Bologna, and a classic case of someone who is very self-abnegating in a way and very self-effacing, and yet you cannot then prevent the house becoming a shrine, that they're becoming a myth about the person, even if the person is the least myth-making, self-mythologizing artist there could be. The studios here, well, these are the first studios, I suppose, that I have. This is the first studio that I've identified with to the degree that I do. I've had many, many different studios over the years, often very makeshift and temporary, and working for here and there in New York, here and there around the UK, and can paint anywhere. I can paint anywhere, but this studio that I don't know how much you can glimpse the famous stove that I. And then yes, of course, it's right behind the house where I live and the house where we were living, and so on. So it's proximity to or contiguity with the life, you know, the life and the art, the studio and the house, attached or semi-attached to each other.
Just to remind, so this is Carlton Place, which is in Glasgow. It's on the River Clyde. So the studio and then the house is a 18th, 19th century building.
Yes, 1801. It's probably, well, you could go to one of the paintings maybe of the river.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
The house looks straight out onto the river. It's a Regency terrace. Quite early for Glasgow. Glasgow's a sort of Victorian city mostly.
Yeah. So we could go to here, for instance. That's a imaginative reconstruction of the river, but there's another painting which is more this one.
That's a very
yes.
Yeah.
That's a more faithful memory / depiction of the view from your living room window, I imagine, of
yes, notionally, yes.
Yes. And so how the river, does it, many of the paintings I remember of your early paintings were of interiors, period interiors, and there I think you have been living at the time in a kind of brutalist modernist housing project in East London, which had nonetheless kind of, it was felt like a ready-made 30s abstraction almost. You're a great fan of the work of Jean Elion, and almost felt like you were living in an Elion painting in a funny way.
Yes, I hadn't really thought of that, but yes, previous places I've lived and worked, I suppose, have had some impact in that.
Resonance.
Too. Yeah.
But this is something of a, well, there are other moments in your career where I can see something very tangibly personal coming in, like the sex paintings, for instance. But this is one of the most literal integrations of the observed life that you live as a motif in your painting, if I'm right in thinking. Have you begun to theorize why there is the turn to something as tangible as the river, and at the same time, of course, what could be more symbolic than a river? So where are we with rivers, and this river in particular?
Well, if I wanted to backpedal and retreat from the confessional and the biographical and the personal and all of that, I could say, well, actually, the river, is a genre motif, as you alluded, in the same way that seascapes are a kind of genre motif, and I had a period where I made a lot of seascape paintings, almost you could say to interrogate the form and the genre rather than. I don't know if the audience took those paintings as self-expressive paintings. I think, the frame around this river painting is a very curious and odd thing, and is and around several of the paintings are as much as the motif, they are strangely familiar and yet, or generic and yet somewhat unlikely signifiers, and so I wouldn't say this painting or even this series or this, whatever it is, this body of work is a radical, is a vast shift. And I think the earlier work has often been more personal than some parts of the audience presume. But yes, it is just that. Those people who know where I live and know this, they know that actually, yes, that is the suspension bridge and that is the Brigade clock tower and so on. Whereas very often in previous paintings that might be described as landscape paintings, I'm not painting an existing place.
Right. I think I see that now. I think perhaps I perhaps imposed more knowledge than is useful. But now I look in particular at this painting, I realize that absolutely it has a lot of the hallmarks of both landscapes and interiors from earlier in your career, which, things that looked generic in the past might actually have been of some personal significance, and something that I'm perhaps overly working up with the biographical fallacy here could in fact be, as you rightly say, an audience member who isn't privy to and isn't so gauche in probing biography as perhaps I have been, that will just say, no, these are almost abstracted motifs of, well, there's a sense of a particular topography, but it's not about Glasgow. It's a painting about whatever these paintings cumulatively are about.
Yeah.
In a way, the subject, the specificity and the genericness of the subject, and the topography and the whimsical invention, perhaps of some of those blossom colors in the foreground, and the way they echo with the paintings on the other side of the river. That sort of interesting, quirky balance between something specific and something general, something odd and something normal or normative, is actually picked up by this strange frame that you drew our attention to, because on the one level it looks like a rather it looks like a found frame of the 50s or 60s or something, but until we begin to examine the perversity of the way in which it's so much wider on the sides than the top, and how actually what seems like a rather sort of cheesy and extraneous frame is actually almost bizarrely policing the way we look at the picture and creating a sense of unease despite its comforting generic quality. What do you recall what you were thinking specifically of doing when you created such a disparity between the horizontal and vertical elements?
No, I can't. I don't know why that came about. It was obviously, it's a decision, and it was a desire to. All the frames are very odd, and are not really. Yes, that one, for instance. I mean, which has a, you can't see, but there's a sort of plexi. There's a kind of, the inner frame is plexi. You see through it to the wall. And on the edge of that painting, there's, on the left-hand edge, there's this little, well, it's the suspension bridge motif again, that created, yes, I don't know if you can expand there, but there and on the frame itself, there are the two arches of the suspension bridge. So it's
right.
Yeah, don't worry.
I want the audience to see this. This is actually one of these applied little model house.
Yeah. And if you go a bit further to the left, you see the one on the frame itself.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
So,
space between the is it paper that's the support here, or is it
no? It's canvas. It's painted on cotton duck.
Right. Then we see the gap between. The gap has an object within it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a kind of strut that support, that attaches the painting to the frame. So, but yeah, and then obviously this picture is much more monochromatic, much more difficult to read than the previous one, the Dredger painting. But I don't know if the Dredger painting is any less peculiar either. I mean, the kind of, that painting, Dredge, the sort of figuration that painting is deploying is a very, I can't quite put my finger, deploying sounds too preconceived but the kind of language, the kind of representation that I ended up with in that painting, it's very hard to put your finger on. It's like a kind of post-impressionist kind of lingua franca. You sort of feel that there are a lot of paintings in the world that are roughly using that degree of illusionism / painterliness, and it seems to have some heritage from Maurice Utrillo or those kind of École de Paris landscape painters. But nobody really paints like that, seriously. So, I found myself in an interesting territory of descriptive sort of vernacular but it wasn't being pursued in any way parodically. I mean, it was a kind of investigation into how to bring that painting up to a certain level of resolution and illusionism and make it convincing space and so on.
Yes, I think what you're hitting on there is something that I talk about the Enigma in your painting, but the Enigma comes down to something quite fundamental of the extent to which there's a sort of tongue-in-cheek quality in your endeavor that sits in a strange way with a very earnest quality as well. But you almost spoke of the Utrillo-ish quality of the painting, and no one really paints like this now, as if to sort of slightly mock your own endeavor, or to sort of
Well,
yourself from
yes,
the
I
nerdy
hope.
image. And at the same time, it's not it's not a bad painting, quote unquote. It's not trying to make a joke about painting. It's actually there are earnest endeavors to within this convention to explore the legitimate questions of space and of the decorativeness and the tangibility and the feltness and the remoteness and all these antimonies. Do you provoke either yourself or your audience with a certain kind of naivete or
well, not intentionally so. And I think Maurice Utrillo, by the way, is a very considerable artist in a lot of his work. No, this is in itself. This is almost a quite tired trope now, isn't it? The sort of the artist being assumed to be ironic and then protesting their sincerity. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. There is always inevitably a high level of self-reflexivity and self-consciousness and self-questioning in any interesting art that becomes boring when it crosses a line and becomes about parody or about cynicism or about But, yeah.
Yes, but that said, I mean, a painter you have written about with enthusiasm is the British painter L.S. Lowry, who did cold northern industrial landscapes. He lived in Salford, just outside Manchester, but it's a terrain that's not unfamiliar to, this is a rather picturesque corner of Glasgow, but a lot of Glasgow is rather Lowry-ish.
Lowry painted in Glasgow.
Oh, he did as well, did he?
Oh, yeah, there's some paintings of Glasgow Cross and drawings, yeah. Oh. He came to Glasgow several times, I think.
Right, there you go. But he is, well, I guess also his status is a strange one because
yes, very much an artist that a lot of people love to hate. I mean, and a lot of serious artists wanted to distance themselves from Lowry because he was a populist and a sort of a British Utrillo.
Yeah, so, yes, just to. Of course, I can do those at home, but that's what one forgets that. But yeah, it's got to get the spelling right. But in case anyone's not familiar with Lowry, this is.
I think MoMA has one or two.
Yes.
And the Met might have them, but they don't tend to have them.
But I think it's no, don't hang it very often. No, I think it's although actually, yeah, maybe the new MoMA actually did have a Lowry, I think. Yeah, I think that's a rather good point of reference for. I don't want to do too much of this, so if we mention names, ladies and gentlemen, please just no one is spying on you, so you are very welcome to Google them in your
I'm sure there's a function in Zoom which puts up a little postage stamp image of any artist that it recognizes the name.
Yes, I think you if you do more credit than it's worth quite yet, but it's let's work on and patent that as a way of making some money on the side here. Yes, yes, but so the intentional sort of quirkiness. I mean, it's a tough one, as you say. I mean, it's become very much of a cliche of the postmodern artist who's sort of taking the mickey out of the act of painting. We can just trot off the names of countless artists who do that, and it's a sort of have your cake and eat it kind of strategy, because some collectors are simply going to look at your paintings on face value and actually be comforted by and pleasantly surprised by the accomplished conservatism of what you're doing, and others will say, aha, well, of course he or she's an ironic.
Subverting those values, yeah. And I mean, I've had a fair amount of critical reception to my work that has assumed, to different degrees, has assumed a kind of a satiric or a cynical or just a highly analytic or detached sort of attitude to what I'm doing.
Yes.
On my part, which I haven't ever had. And as you say, you referenced the sex paintings as another example of work that I think you're right in saying that they're more personal works to me, but they were received as kind of critical commentaries on pornography when I was first shown. Quite often people say, oh, he's taking these images from the web or from pornography and then transforming the photographic digital image back into the high art vernacular of oil painting, and it's about this, which was miles from my preoccupations.
Well, as long as they keep people chatting about you in a high-minded and
well, I might be wrong about that's the thing. I mean, if somebody, there are many artists who protest the sincerity of works that seem to me to be manifestly, if not, well, ironic is the wrong word, but that are parodic. And I think that the artists are wrong. I think that the work is parodic, and they're just deluding themselves that it's sincerely expressive of, So I may equally be wrong. If there's a strong enough consensus that says my work is kind of postmodern, juggling with the empty tropes of dead painting. You can't persuade somebody maybe that out of that view if that's their reading. It's how invested are you, and how much do you identify with and feel yourself immersed in the culture and history and practice and activity of painting. And in a sense, if you're not very immersed in that, then in a sense, all painting will look like parody to you. In a sense, to the cynic, everything will appear cynical. Perhaps.
Yeah, that is the that I'm afraid is an I don't quite know how that code can ever be cracked out of. That's the matrix that in which any contemporary artist is imprisoned, because however earnest or technically accomplished one is, it's symptomatic of the end game, that everything one does can be interpreted as ironic, and as lacking in authenticity. I think one thing that might help some people ground your work in a more earnest endeavor is the extent to which you engage with art of the past as a writer rather than as a quoter of the art of the past in your paintings. As a writer and scholar, you've written and thought about painting a great deal of historic work, and it's not a sideline. It's not a different Merlin James who writes about art, because it feels like it's very much an extension of the same impetuses that animate the studio work. At least that's been my way of reading your work. You've just recently published a book, actually, on Chardin.
Well, an essay, an essay really. I mean, it'll be a very small book.
Yes.
It'll come out. It's delayed by COVID, like everything.
It's got a spine, so therefore, however short it is, it has the distinction of being a book. An essay. You've written an essay on Chardin, but it's very much, I think, from a painter's perspective, and from a perspective precisely of questions of biography, intention, narrative, meaning. How do we interpret this work? Can you tell us? This is a painting that's actually in Glasgow. It's at the Hunterian Art Gallery, which is part of the University of Glasgow's art collections. It's obviously a rather fabulous Chardin within that genre of ladies taking tea. There's several of them. Briefly, apart from its being a painting you could go see a mile or so from your home, what was your attraction to this painting, and at what level did you find yourself engaging with it?
Yeah, I wonder how long we've got. Sam will warn us if we're running out of time. It's, I suppose the critical point to say, or a critical point to say, might be to relate this back to this biographical question that raised its head at the beginning. The question of the identity of this model, of this person that we're looking at, and the degree to which it's reasonable for us to speculate or wonder about who she is, if it is a she, yes, it's a lady taking tea, and what her relationship was to the artist, and so all of those questions are maybe, are sort of hanging in the air in this painting, and precisely because it's not. I mean, some of Chardin's paintings that name the sitter and so on, or are of known sitters. This one's of an unknown sitter, and so there's that issue is very alive in this painting for me as well, and I didn't analyze too much why I chose this painting to write about for this particular. It's a series. It's got small books on paintings, but it quickly dawned on me that it had some relevance to my own situation, my own questions in my mind about what some of the models in my work, what the status of their identity is and their relationship to me in the mind of a viewer, whoever a viewer is. I mean, there is no neutral viewer or ideal viewer, but this is an amazing painting, of course, and world-famous painting, and this is an amazing photograph of it taken in the 1960s when it was out of its frame. And it's somewhat overexposed photograph, but I've never seen a better reproduction. But I don't know, how long have we got? Are we stopping stripping?
I think we got 5 minutes. We could dwell for 3 or 4 minutes on this painting, and then it would be great to bring in our audience. And let's see.
Okay, that's beyond the hour. That's good. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So. Did you postulate, do you, that there is a degree of affection between artist and sitter in this particular Chardin? Is that where you go with your...
Well, I think that the longer you look at the painting, the more likely you are to wonder about that. I mean, it could be a professional model set up to in a pose, in a domestic pose. But even so, there would be the question of what is the point of this painting? Why did Chardin pose a professional model if that's all she was, to take that role? I mean, the question doesn't go away of, to put it another way, how are we, if we have become Chardin in a sense as viewers, how do we relate to this person? And how far is it reasonable to wonder who she is and what she is and what she's thinking and what she's, at what point does that become extra critical fantasizing,
Yes. It seems to me that Chardin, we think of Chardin, well, Chardin was famously a painter of still life, and that was considered the most humble of the genres, and yet it was recognized by his peers that he was a peerless painter, and therefore, in a way, the revolutionary impact of Chardin was to turn the hierarchy of genres on their head. And so we might therefore feel that there's as much signification invested in the cup and the teapot as there is in the sitter. There's even the possibility, one might think, that the sitter is, it could be a professional model, it could be the love of his life, it could be an invented figure who doesn't exist at all. So in a way, I always feel with Chardin, especially say the kids sharpening their pencils, or the little boy playing with a house of cards, and all of his quite sort of sentimental domestic scenes are ones in which the relation of the unself-consciously observed human protagonist, is primarily to have a relation, is that person has a relationship to the objects in the painting. That in a way this is an animated still life, in that his fascination with the still life motifs. And I mean, if you cropped the painting, you could make almost 2 paintings out of this, couldn't you? There's a perfect of a teapot on a dresser with one drawer slightly open. It's very suggestive, that dark strip of the interior of the drawer against the dark teapot, and then the figure could just be stirring her cup. But and then the sort of wonderful kind of back and forth between the colors and the shapes in her costume, and the colors and shapes of the china teacup.
We are objects. Human beings are objects in a sense, as well as other things, and we are abstractions as well as other things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Merlin, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground in a short time, and that's the way conversations between us so often are. I'm going to come out of the share screen so that we can see you, and also so that I can see. Do you know something very peculiar? Sorry, Sam, I just want to bring you in with a technical thing. Is that I don't quite know how. Oh, I see Q&A. Ah, here it is, Q&A. Okay, wonderful.
I'll give a round of applause to you both, and thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of the group. I know there are a lot of painters and painting-minded people in the crowd. So yeah, I think if we have time for questions, that would be wonderful.
I can see something called Q&A, which just has a few things from Lorna Ritz and an anonymous attendee. But I wondered if you are seeing more. I can't see the usual comments, which is how am I supposed to see?
I've just got it set up so that anyone can put their question or comment in the Q&A, and people might raise your.
Moderate that, Sam, because I actually can't see them. I'm afraid I can see the participants, but I can't see comments, which I usually can.
It's just the Q&A, so you won't see the comments. I would invite anyone to enter a comment or a question in the Q&A, and David, you can see that.
Yes, I can now. There's 10. Oh, I see. I'm looking. Right. Sorry. Good. So Lorna Ritz, working in my studio for decades. The studio paints the painting. I used to deny how attached I was to it, but just walking into this beautiful space is so uplifting. The river must do the same for you and looking at it for so long. Yes, Lorna Ritz asks. And Caitlin McQueen, seems to me the style is more of a result of relying on imagination and memory, sans ruler, to create architectural spaces. And what you get is slightly flawed, but highly felt, neither naive nor cynical. That's from Caitlin McQueen.
That's nice. That's a very nice comment.
Yeah, I was thinking so too, actually. And it resonates with what the gallery was saying, that you're not working from photographs or direct observation, but you're sort of forcing memory to do its work, even though it's literally 100 yards from where you're, 50 yards from where you're painting. You do have your back to the motif, don't you?
Yes. The motif is just the accumulated sense of the space that I've got, and I almost was, in the end, preventing, consciously avoiding looking to once that painting was going and others like it. I was almost avoiding taking the opportunity when I was in that window or one of those windows, and could have thought, okay, let me get this right. What side of the church door is that cherry tree? But I tried to not do that, and to just keep accumulating these momentary. It's familiar, like the first commentator said there, that this accumulation of familiarity and momentary glimpses of things.
Yeah, and Joseph Markham, he asked me to ask you if you'd say anything about the recurring motif of a sort of oval bean pod parentheses form, which sits
yes
in front of a lot of paintings. Let me go back into share screen to
behind me on the wall is one in progress.
Right. Let's see if is this another? Is this one that has parentheses?
It's very hidden there. The one below.
The one below is more. Yes.
Yes, this sort of kind of whatever it is, skateboard, surfboard, sort of leaf thing. It's like a lozenge or an oval, or and it's just been in my work for a long time, since I was a student. And I didn't really know where it came from or what it signified. It seemed like it wasn't an abstract thing, but it wasn't a figurative representational thing either, and it wasn't a symbolic thing. It was this pictorial thing, or not even pictorial. It's almost it's some kind of form that exists. At this point, it exists in my mind in a kind of platonic dimension that I don't know where it exists, but then it comes up in, here it becomes this tree, this poplar tree that's outside the house. It often becomes a tree.
Here, like an airplane or a...
Yeah.
Yes.
But what its significance is, or what it, I don't really know, or why it's, but it is just, and a couple of accompanying elements as well that often accompany it. Like this diagonal.
Power, right? It can become literally a tree or a component of some form, or else it can be a purely abstract.
Yeah, and it's comes. I mean, if the two figures painting right below it, there, you know, that space between the arm and the torso, I notice. You know, between the arm and the side of the body. You know, there it is. There it is again, in a way, and you know, it's in microscopic. I mean, maybe the brush in the hand is also this kind of leaf-like.
Yes.
Shape. And in these sex paintings, obviously, it becomes a sort of like a sexual element.
Phallus, possibly, yes. Alexi Worth is actually asking a question very specifically about this painting. He'd love to hear more about the striking self-portrait. It's rectangle of projected light and the mysterious second self.
Yes, thank you, Alexi. And I've just been on a Zoom Q&A with Alexi about his show. Yeah, that painting. This painting was a big surprise, and I mean, this is biographical heresy in a sense. Me just even recounting this as an anecdote, because who cares really? But it actually was painted in a kind of amnesia. I can't really remember painting this painting. I can remember painting a certain few details, but it was a bit as if it was written I was going to say, like Kubla Khan, you know, it was a bit written in a trance, painted in a kind of, in a couple of sittings. And yes, the two figures, the other self, that's right, they're like two. It was when I do remember a stage of this painting where the figure at the back was a reflection, the figure at the front, as if it was reflected in a mirror, and the figure at the front had the arm was raised, and to mirror the back view. It was literally a mirror image of the same person, and then at some point it became two figures.
And at a certain point, female as well.
And then at a certain point, well, they were both female. And then it was the front one that transitioned. And I think of this painting that it's like the figure at the front is like a puppet, and the figure at the back is like the puppeteer controlling it. But that's just that's a thing in my head.
Right. Thank you. Jan Warm wants you to address, we don't have to immediately, but address issues of beauty and tenderness and the tensions of abstraction. And there's Caitlin McQueen again. Thomas Bosket. There's so many forms, types of memory. What form, Merlin, do you feel your memories take specifically as they form into themselves into paint? Maybe speak of how they move from sense to form. And Joyce Shapiro. Chagall comes to mind looking at the work of James. She wants to know if he's any influence. And Nicola Probert. How would Merlin describe the particular quality of information that his paintings offer? And would he say there is a relationship between this information and meaning?
Oh gosh, lots of things there. Chagall, I think, great up to about 1927 or 8. I'm afraid I sort of adhere to the canonical view that Chagall goes off. I do think that, and I love to defy that and deny that and say no, actually. Yeah, the late work is not the decline that everyone says it is. I fear that it is in Chagall, for me, a lot of the time, but amazing up to the mid to late 20s. Tenderness and what was the other adjective? Beauty and tenderness. Yes, just a big yes to that. I mean, I think tenderness and delicacy and, you know, all those slightly embarrassing sensitivities and sensibilities of empathy, sensitivity, tenderness. Those are qualities in painting that I value super highly, and you know, it sounds simplistic, but those are the things that I suppose prove a painting to not be cynical or a parodic exercise. And how those things are conveyed, and how they're, I mean, in the Chardin, how tenderness and delicacy and beauty are conveyed is a whole, I mean, that's the whole world of painting language, and how brutality can be conveyed, and how you know, the range of emotions and sensitivities that can be articulated in any art form. You know, that's the measure of its profundity and greatness, I think. And what else was there? There were other brilliant questions in there. Information. I mean, information is an interesting question. What one means by information.
I don't know how Nicola Probert would define information as do we mean, do you understand it to mean observed incident, or do you stuff that's open to interpretation, or yes, 1 hour and 50 minutes, very good. Yes, I think that we can go away and think about information, and there's another question for us to ponder after this event. Perhaps another from Kate McQueen, who says that she thinks it's very risky to rely on memory and imagination. It's a rigorous intellectual exercise. Do you recommend it? I think that's maybe one painter talking to another as to whether to recommend something as an exercise. But Merlin, it's getting a little, we've been on for an hour and a quarter, and I think in this age of Zoom, we need to ration
okay.
impose on our audience. But I do want to ask then, just to, if there's anything to wrap up that you feel hasn't been covered, or if...
No, I mean, I'll try and say something very quick about information then, and to not let that just slip by. I mean, we tend to think of the word information. We think of the word information as, you know, it has a connotation of dryness and factuality and objectivity as opposed to subjectivity, but really information, you know, it's that which gives form, isn't it? It's that which informs, and that can consist of emotion and subjectivity as much as it might consist of data. And so the paintings are kind of maybe a compound of those two kinds of information, or an investing of the second kind with the first kind, or something like that. But I do think that rigor and discipline and measurability of, is important, and that the danger, as you say, the danger of the imagination and of memory and of a kind of mushy sort of mixture of imagination and memory can lead you into a kind of woolly, self-generated kind of world of subjectivity and of unchecked subjectivity, and that would be a problem. That would be a fear.
Yes. Information, it's hard to quite process for me, because is it being understood as the accumulation of sensations on a canvas, as opposed to, is information the opposite of the organizing principle, which is basically form? What does information mean? Is information the sum of all the notations and textures and observations that a painter brings to the canvas, and that then has to be sorted into something bigger and better than information?
Maybe it's just another word for meaning. I mean, we think of information as being not inherently meaningful, but something to be interpreted and turned into meaning. But I think in the end, maybe the information is the meaning. So in the Chardin, we don't have the piece of information about who that person was biographically, but we are informed. We have what the painting has been informed by. We have the fact. We have the experience.
We've come probably to the end of our time, but Sam, I wonder if we're allowed to bring in audience members, or are they just, as it were, trapped behind the words that they offer?
Yeah, we're all trapped. I think it's up to you both, if you're comfortable with that. By all means.
Yes, because I think if we could hear from Caitlin McQueen, Nicola Probert, and Lexi Worth, if they're still with us in this Zoom, it would be great to hear some other voices. Are we allowed to turn them on one by one, just for a quick minute each from them? Because it could be that information means something entirely different to Nicola. I don't know. How does it work, Sam? Or am I upsetting the apple cart here?
Let's see.
Sorry, I should have sorted out this tech before launching into such a revolutionary idea. Because I'll tell you what. Let's find mechanisms to explore the conversation directly in another forum. I do see one other very interesting question here. I'm just going to put the last 3 minutes here. It's from Nicholas Hartful. He says, I was intrigued to learn that some of the components of the new paintings were toys, the Indian toys of figures on swings. Could you say something about the act of painting a toy, which is of course a very Chardin-esque motif, or indeed a model of something like a building offers to you? Are they as real as anything else? And I'll just find those two paintings called Indian toys.
3 paintings called Indian toys, yeah. Oh. Yeah. And the big river painting includes them as well, the big painting with the oval in the center.
Indian, you're not looking at it because I'm not showing the screen. Sorry, let me go back to sharing the screen, and we can see, here it is, yes. Well,
that one, that's one of them. So it's on the right, it's a bird cage with two birds in, and on the left, it's these two figures on swings that swing.
Yes.
And they're little, they're children's toys. Yeah, the pungency and poignancy, obviously, of toys, is almost is inherent. Although along with that, the danger of sentimentality and I suppose. So that one has to be alert to that, as with the sentimentality of painting a river or painting a seascape, the things that have obvious symbolic, I suppose is the word, or emblematic resonance. And the part of what makes Chardin interesting is he picks unlikely things like the spinning top and the shuttlecock things. They're not quite the toys that you expect sometimes.
These are Indian toys rather than just regular Hamlin toys or whatever.
Yes, and I give that information again. I mean, I give the information in the title that they're Indian toys. I mean, one would not know that necessarily, or probably looking at the paintings. And India is a reference, and it has a significance for me and for Carol Rhodes. But again, how much to say or not say? Maybe it's coy to say, to call it Indian toys and then not explain.
You say that, but may I just say one thing in defense of the paintings, and that is that to some viewers, they may say, well, why are they called Indian toys? I want to know all about that. What kind of Indians are we talking about, etc. And, they might dig, they might find that Carol spent her childhood in India as parents, blah, blah, blah. Now, that's fine. But the paintings, as we see, are paintings with objects that are appropriated and then rendered in a very quirky way that pushes them back into the painterly realm through this the distance between the carved object and the screen that then makes it into a painting motif. And so toys are psychoanalytic terms, the transitional object, and objects in a state of transition, even if you don't accept the dictums of psychoanalysis, seems to be of the essence in your painting project. So maybe that's the key for us, that there is, as there would be for any artist, almost any artist, the potential for biography, for the sentimental, for the anecdotal, but they are also vehicles for sort of an inquiry about painting itself, and they are something that coheres with sort of an internal dynamics within the painting, so that we are at liberty to either probe or ignore the title and the motif, because the machine of the painting is coherent enough in and of itself.
Hopefully, yes, that's a lovely thing to say, and I hope that, yes, the paintings live up to that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Merlin, you're 5 hours ahead of us, so I imagine you're keen to open the window and breathe in some river air in Glasgow. Thank you very, very much for joining us, and thank you, Sam, and of course, Graham Nixon and everyone at the Studio School for hosting this Zoom event. It's the penultimate lecture. Sam, perhaps you want to say a word about tomorrow evening's final fixture in the fall 2020 series, but Merlin and I will say good night and thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you, David. Yes, tomorrow night is our last lecture of the season, of this virtual season. I want to thank everyone who's joined tonight, and if you've joined more than one talk, we really appreciate you attending. Tomorrow night is the artist Jim Condren in conversation with the painter Amy Sherrill. So if you haven't registered for that, please do visit the website, and you can receive the confirmation or tune in on YouTube at 6:30 tomorrow evening Eastern Standard Time. So, thank you both, and we hope to virtually see you tomorrow.
Fantastic.
Okay, good night.
Thanks. Good night, everyone. Thanks.